Thank you all for coming for our first MSA evening session. Today we have with us Mr. Roger Hawkins from Hawkins & Brown. So alongside Mr. Russell Brown, Roger founded Hawkins Brown in 1988. At Hawkins Brown, the design is responsive and based on the cultural, societal, and environmental context of the project. Using their deep technical expertise, creativity, and bringing in people of all backgrounds, the firm has grown to be one of UK's leading practices. Having over 30 years of experience, he has worked on a variety of high-profile and award-winning projects, including Crossrail stations such as Bond Street, Tottenham Road Court, and Liverpool Street. Also, university buildings for numbers of institutions, including the Bartlett School of Architecture, University of Reading, as well as housing schemes across London and Park Hill, Sheffield for Urban Splash, and that was shortlisted for the Reba Sterling Prize. Roger has also lectured at architectural schools in the UK, USA, and China, spoken at conferences, and written for the architectural press. He is currently a visiting professor of practice at the University of Sheffield. Roger is a people person. His ability to see things from the client's viewpoint and to get into the mind of set users is a key at Hawkins & Brown practice of architecture. He's a great strategist with a keen attention to detail. He sees the opportunity in everything and uses this to raise aspirations for those around him. So I'm just going to hand it over to Roger now to talk to us about him, his practice, and inspirations. And after that, we'll have a short Q&A session, so please get your questions ready in your mind. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the introduction, and thank you for the invitation. It's a bit daunting, though, talking about inspirations. I noted there was an S on the end, so you need more than one good idea, inspirations. So I was trying to work out what inspiration is, and almost to think that through, I was trying to work out what the opposite of inspiration is. And I guess writer's block, or in the case of an architect, just staring at a blank sheet of paper is the opposite of inspiration. And so what I really like is, hopefully this is going to work. I don't know why it isn't working. Is that image. These are people in my office. This is, to me, the opposite, what inspiration is about. You know, we're throwing away that blank sheet of paper. I'm always scared of a blank sheet of paper. Where do you start a project, a design project? And for me, it's about collaboration. It's about getting inspiration from other people. It's about doing research, and that's really what I wanted to talk about today, is some of the streams of research that Hawkins Brown has done and how we get inspiration from doing our research. So the lady in this picture, Louisa, is a partner of Hawkins Brown. Her specialism is sustainability. She's throwing away the blank piece of paper. I think it's about lateral thinking. And actually, I just to check I was on the right path, I'm going to read this bit here. This is the Collins Dictionary definition of inspiration. It's a feeling of enthusiasm you get from someone or something that gives you new and creative ideas. Well, that's what you want as an architect. So this, to me, was the key photograph to start the talk off. Don't start with a blank sheet of paper. And most of our work doesn't really start with a blank sheet of paper. A lot of our work is about working on existing sites or with existing buildings. And so the first piece of paper you look at is often the survey drawing. And our work, and this is one of our oldest projects. I'm only going to show one old project, but this is one of the first projects that we did that got us noticed, if you like. And it's a group of existing buildings in Beak Street, which is in the West End of London. And there had been a planning application which was completely compliant with the planning policy, which is to do a facade retention and put all new floors behind it. And the planning committee in Westminster threw that out and said they wanted a more sensitive approach. And our approach was to really study the existing buildings, i.e. look at the survey, don't look at a blank sheet of paper, and work out the attributes and the merits of all of the buildings. And we did selective demolition, essentially by infill and roof extension. And this project was literally that. It was required to have a mansard roof. No one said that mansard roof couldn't be curved, so that was a stainless steel mansard roof we put in. I was really excited to meet the contractor who built this. It was MPL, and MPL International were coming to put this stainless steel roof on the building. Only to find out that a bunch of Scousers turned up, and MPL was Merseyside Plumbing Limited, and that's who it was. But I think one thing I wanted to just point out, the image on the right here shows how we mixed new and old together. The two columns in the furthest distance are the old columns of the building, and the four columns nearer are new columns. We understood the structural approach to how the building was built and replicated it and worked very carefully to extend the building. And that sensitivity, I think, is something that we were doing about 30 years ago. And there's the proof on the left, Russell Brown and myself, before we had to worry about health and safety on site and when all photographs are still black and white. And you know, I think the other thing for me, inspiration, is not to try and do it on your own. Actually, we've always been a partnership. We've always relied on talking to other people, and that is a key move in inspiration, I think. And that attitude of studying an existing building and how you might extend it has something that has been throughout our work, I think, ever since then. And this is a more recent project on Great Suffolk Street, where we took an existing warehouse and saw clues in that we could literally sort of mirror it. But it wasn't just a complete replica. We actually saw opportunities for changing windows, for really adding, I think, something to the building. And I think that is really a creative part of our process. You know, when you're adding to an old building, do you match? Do you contrast? How do you make that join? I think these are really quite important things. So this is before and after on the inside, and a close-up there. A very successful little project. We enjoy still working on this scale of project, adding new and old. And at a slightly larger scale, recently completed was a project for the Royal College of Surgeons, which had this Grade 2 style listed frontage in Lincoln's Inn. The back of the building had been demolished in the war and had been rebuilt in really quite poor quality brickwork in the late 40s, early 50s. And our analysis was that we couldn't really repair that building. So this has got a new back and a restored front. And it's that opportunity, I think, of mixing new and old. We're able to retain the features of the listed building, and this library has been refurbished. But in the middle, an atrium space that links new and old together. And I think, for me, this is, again, a key part of finding inspiration with an existing building, looking at what it offers, how we can actually work with the retained brickwork. So if you look at the middle image, the back wall there is the rear reinstated brickwork of that original listed building. So you get a sense of where you are in the building, and that vertical circulation means that the floor levels between new and old don't necessarily have to absolutely match. We can deal with tolerances in the building. And there's a section between that new and old, really quite, I think, sort of knitting together, almost like surgery, I think, when you're playing with old buildings, how you get them to work and bring them back to life. And there's something about a scale of buildings. And as my practice has grown bigger, we're nearly 300 people now, where we've got an office of nearly 40 people, Studio North in Manchester, Studio Edinburgh, about 12 people, Studio Ireland, about in Dublin, is doubling in size. It's gone from 4 to 8 people. But we're picking up larger projects. And the print works in Wapping is where News International used to print the Sunday Times Daily Mail. Redundant, empty building, and the owners of this site, British Land, couldn't really work out what to do with this building, and they got Allies and Morrison to do a master plan of the whole of Canada Water, and this building was earmarked for demolition. And we lobbied Roger Madeline, who was the director of British Land in charge of this project, and suggested that it's really worth looking at retention. How can we bring this building back to life? So to be fair to them, he listened, and we put in parallel planning applications. One was for refurbishment, one was for demolition. They both got consent, but they've made the decision in the past few months to retain the existing building and extend it, which is this scheme here, which is just now moving into more detailed design work. And going back to what it was, it's a crazy building. Why would you design anything like that? You know, and it's such an opportunity to sort of work with that and actually look at it for what it is. Look at the scale of the old print hall and bring that back into new use. So this is a current project of ours where we're really looking at mixing new and old together. But I think the inspiration came from studying the existing building and learning, if you like, from some of our earlier work. New elevation, showing the new frontage. So in this opportunity, there's a considerable amount of new building, but we don't want to dwarf the old building. It's very hard to dwarf the old building. It is such a large space. And if you know that building, the Printworks, there's been a campaign to maintain the nightclub there. And we have again been listening, our client's been listening, and the revised scheme being developed at the moment is retaining the nightclub in the Printworks. I mentioned research. I mentioned getting inspiration from doing research. And what we started looking at this scale of building is other examples, other precedents for how you bring back large scale, perhaps industrial buildings for new uses, for contemporary workspace, let's say. And we found that there was really quite a lot of buildings around the world that have been through this transformation and studied them. And one of the things we found was that they're attractive because of volume. It's not just floor area. The guy in this image is actually an agent, Mike. He's Mr. TMT, which is tech and media companies. And he believes that buildings of this scale, being unique, offer a robust and large-scale opportunity. So we've been promoting this scale of work, and actually we're picking up more projects, quite excitingly. And this is another one we finished. This was, the order's put the wrong way around because we did Here East first, but Here East was built for the 2012 Olympics in London. It was the Press and Broadcast Centre. The Press Centre in the foreground was built for 3,000 journalists to report on the Olympics. The Broadcast Centre was for 30 TV studios to broadcast simultaneously around the world all the events going on at the Olympics. It was 1.2 million square foot of space in one building, and nobody really knew what to do with it post-games. Legacy was important for the Olympic Games, but this is one building they hadn't really got an idea for. You know, the stadium was, surprise, surprise, going to be West Ham Football Stadium. The Aquatic Centre is the National Aquatic Centre. The Velodrome is the National Velodrome. But there isn't a need for a National Press and Broadcast Centre. Its transformation was left a bit unclear. And it was a developer architect competition that we entered with Delancey. Our idea was to transform this building into this centre for innovation and creative business. And we were competing against people who wanted to completely demolish this and put housing here. And actually their bid and their offer was more money than Delancey's offer. But the legacy company within the ODA felt it important to bring this building back into life and to create employment and jobs. Difficult to get a sense of scale of this building because it is just so big. 3 jumbo jets could line up wingtip to wingtip. Actually, if you turn it on its side, it's higher than the Canary Wharf building. It's a massive building. And what we proposed to do, and what we've now completed, was to add more floor space. Now that was quite a brave move by Delancey because they already had 1.2 million square foot of space not knowing what to do with it. And we've added another 100,000 square foot, so it's now 1.3 million square foot of space. But we added mezzanines, which actually gave opportunities for different scale of working. We projected some bays, we cut in certain areas just to create different work environments in Here East. It's been a big success. It's pretty much fully let now. Delancey, our client, could have let this many times over for storage or call centres. They didn't want to do that. They wanted to maintain this notion of creative industries and startup businesses. There are 3 universities in here now. Loughborough University and UCL have got space in here. The V&A are moving their digitisation of their collections to this building. So it's becoming this incredible focus in the Olympic Park for creative business. This is the canal side, which is the press centre where the journalists were based. So this is already built for office and involved less sort of change. What we did here was to just cut open the lower levels and put in local business, bars and restaurants, and we persuaded the QS. I'm saying this to our colleagues from G&T here. The quantity surveyor wanted to cut holes through the building for the extracts that all of the kitchens needed, and we persuaded them that actually we could put those flues, fire-rated flues, so they're not cheap, on the outside of the building. But just adding those yellow flues just, I think, demonstrated change to the building and was worth that sort of extra effort. So inside this building is, I think, working really well in terms of providing flexibility, large and small scale space. You know, we did a lot of study into how you might plan these buildings to ensure that sort of people circulating around the building have got opportunities to bump into each other, you know, and get that sort of inspiration from each other. We created these pods. Again, not that easy to get a sense of scale. These are meeting rooms for 12 people just hanging in space. And we work with a company that does CNC cutting out of plywood to make these. They were fully assembled off-site and just craned into position. And we work with the same company on the gantry at the side of here east. The gantry was built in games mode for each of these television studios to have its own independent air handling units. It's structurally independent, so they could all be whirring away 30 sets of kit for each of the TV studios. And the ambition was, or the intention was, to demolish the gantry. And we said, well, why are we doing that? It's existing space. Let's see if we can use it. And we worked with Architecture 00, who'd got the Wiki House concept, and we helped them develop that concept so we could actually mass produce it a bit more and bring in a bit more variety. And these are now a series of artist studios, all let out on affordable rent for startup business. So quite fun images of the gantry. That project and a few other projects got us interested in modern methods of construction or design for manufacturing and assembly off-site. So I mentioned research, I mentioned getting this inspiration from research. One of the things that we do in our practice is offer to people, perhaps when they've been 4 or 5 years post-qualified, the opportunity of doing 3 months full-time research sabbatical. A lot of people take that up over 6 months, and they might be doing a project on site half-time and the rest of it doing research. And one of our guys went and actually spent a year as a research bursary with L&G looking at modern methods of construction and how that could inform the process of building housing. This became known as CoLab, and we've really learned from that how we can build large volume housing more efficiently. So this project benefited from that research into collaborative working and modern methods of construction. So in a sense here, the research led us not to be looking at that blank sheet of paper. It was a pretty empty site. The brief was to put 240 homes on this site as a block for private rented with lots of amenity. The amenity was going to be at the ground floor. And we felt that perhaps it was more appropriate to lift the amenity and the shared space to level 10 and link a bridge there. And there are 2.5 towers, so that the tower that's only 10 stories, the roof space of that becomes part of this amenity space, which frees up the ground floor. So the ground floor are now opportunities for business and office space, workspace. So it become much more of a mixed-use building. But our research was into how we could deliver this efficiently. The contractor here was Mace. We were producing volumetric solutions. The sort of limitation of size of these units is what you can actually put on the back of a lorry and deliver to site. And so that this was being built, quite tall buildings. We were doing a floor a week, or Mace were delivering a floor a week by having this level of sort of thinking about modern methods of construction. And here's the building now finished with its sky bridge. Quite a lot of colour. We've done research into colour. One of our research bursaries moved into thinking about colour. And she now has a role in our office as the colour police. We can't actually specify any colour in our office unless it's been sanctioned. So we have, and it is quite an interesting science about colour, because what colours work well together, and actually what colour are you specifying versus what it's actually going to look like, depending on the reflective quality of that material. Is it in shade? Is it in sunlight? Is it in a recess? Is it reflective and aluminium? Is it a liner within glass? So we've been learning a lot about how colour actually gets translated, if you like, into built form. And what we did on this particular project, and I think I'm going to slip back, the slide on the left was developed by one of the guys in the studio, something he called the spandrelizer. So we were able to just change colours at the flick of a switch, depending on what the client and the planning authority thought was appropriate, just to experiment different colours and experimentation. And as you move around the building, the colours of this building really do change. So the spandrelizer is something that then informed through Revit construction and went straight from the spandrelizer to the factory, so that the glass was being cooled off in the right order when it was needed. And that's plot 6 and the East Village. So this is again part of the Olympic Park in London, now known as Portland's Place. And our use of colour doesn't just, I think, affect the outside of buildings. We're very keen and want to do research into how colour can really inform the inside of buildings. I think another part of our research is looking at social value of buildings. And that stems from one of our earliest projects. This was a competition we won in Corby in Northamptonshire, probably about almost 20 years ago now. The brief called for a new civic centre. Corby was one of the few towns in the country at the time that was promoting growth. It had a population of 50,000 people, but no rail station. And the rail station closed down when the steelworks closed down in the 1970s. So if you lived in Corby and wanted to go to the cinema, you had to get the bus to Kettering, but the last bus back was about 10:30, so you used to miss the end of the films. So it really wasn't a great place to live. There's a little book, if you've ever seen it, called Crap Towns. Well, Corby's in Crap Towns. And then they did Crap Towns 2. There's only one town that's in both versions, and it's Corby. So it was really struggling to actually place itself on the map, and had a really dynamic chief executive who ran this international competition and wanted to have a new civic centre, which was a new civic officers and also a new art provision in Corby. And we won this competition, what we call the Corby Cube. People say to me, well, Roger, it's not a cube, is it? I said, well, actually it is, because it's 2 stories below ground. So this is the cube now. And the brief was very complicated. Everybody in the council wanted to be on the ground floor because they wanted that frontage. They wanted to meet with the local people. So we designed a spiral which sort of connected the ground to the first floor, and we called all of that the first floor. So we're able to double the amount of ground floor accommodation. And one of the users in that was Northamptonshire County Council library provision. So we looked at positioning the library on the ramp, which was a little contentious because it meant that everyone using the building would have to walk through the library. And the chief executive turned to the chief librarian in the interview and said, well, is this going to work? Do you want people walking through the library? And the librarian said, of course we do. This is fantastic. So this is what they built. And what we've been doing is doing post-occupancy evaluation. We've been back to this building 10 years after it was finished and interviewed the librarian, who's still the same person now as it was 10 years ago. And bucking the national trend, most library most libraries have got less people, these public libraries have got less people going into them. This library's got 36% more people in that period because it had been so much an integral part of the building. This is new council chamber, which is a double height space. Going back to, there's a front elevation with a window here overlooks the square, so you can actually see activity going on in the council chamber, which is something they're keen to do. And this is the theatre, which is an integral part of the building. It's set in the ground and quite a traditional theatre in the round, a 400-seat theatre, because Corby had a theatre which they needed to replace, and they were very keen to maintain the provision of this important theatre. And what it's getting now is a lot of West End productions trialling here before they move to the West End, because the quality of the facilities, the full fly tower, is something they're keen to promote. So our analysis was that was a good building and provided a lot of social value, and we've been able to justify that. And another building we visited was the Hub in Coventry, again 10 years post completion. It was built as a student centre in the centre of Coventry. The image on the left here sort of indicates where it is. The photograph was taken during construction, but to the right of that main aerial view is Coventry Cathedral, and our site is to the left of that. You didn't used to be able to walk through to get to Coventry Cathedral because there was a building in the way. And our ambition here was to, in demolishing that building, was to create this new route to link the heart of the university back to Coventry Cathedral. The other thing we were able to do was to get neighbours talking to each other, because the building above that was the Herbert Art Gallery. It had its own service yard, and the building we demolished had its own service yard, both of which are small and compact. And so we identified an opportunity of sharing the service yards here, and created this building which is relatively simple in that it's just an open space, and a lot of the function of the building, which is about providing a variety of work and learning experiences for students, were in furniture solutions, either cubicles or huts. In the image on the left, we created dog bowls, lots of Lisbon furniture solutions, and they proved so popular that the university had to introduce a live app so people could identify which ones are coming free when they were coming free, and the new route through to the cathedral. But I think in terms of learning from our buildings and studying our buildings, when we've been back to visit this, we found that the offers changed a lot. They've wanted to increase the catering provision. They've extended their library, so a lot of the learning spaces have moved from this building back into the library. And I think we learned that by keeping the building relatively simple, essentially just a clear span with a lot of furniture solutions, it became very adaptable for ongoing changes, adaptability and flexibility in use. And I put this picture in because someone chose it to be the poster for this talk. And that's the only reason I selected it, really. But I do think in terms of inspiration, this is where we were looking at a blank sheet of paper, thinking where we're going to get inspiration here. It's a greenfield site, essentially. It was adjacent to some Victorian terraced houses that used steps to get up to an upper ground floor level. So we took inspiration from the surrounding site. So that inspiration doesn't just come from, I think, analysis of an existing building you might be extending. It comes from doing careful review of context. And in this case, it was how you put in modern housing in what is really a Victorian suburb. And attention to detail, looking at the brickwork quality, which I think was on some of those original buildings or on the adjacent sites. And actually thinking about social housing, making sure that there's quality there. Just because it's social housing and done to a yardstick in terms of cost efficiency, it doesn't mean that we can't think about double height spaces, about views not only of the building from distance, but actually from within the building looking out. I mentioned colour research. This is a project we've just finished recently at Cardiff University, Cardiff Innovation Centre. Interestingly, jointly funded between the university in Cardiff and the City Council, who wanted to provide a new building to encourage startup business, innovation. They found that a lot of people studying at Cardiff were leaving Cardiff at the end of their course, and how could they provide incubator space and encourage people to stay. So this became the new atrium space in the building. That notion which we'd learnt from here east about opportunities for people to circulate around a building and to mix, bump and grind. Actually, some of the tenants were through the local authority, some through the university. How might they meet each other and collaborate? Some of that happens through social media. The building has an app. Everyone who uses the building is connected to it through that app. But actually part of it is just by ensuring the circulation works in a way that you get to meet your neighbours. And colour. And this bright red passed our colour police. So this is just opened and we're monitoring its use. I think, I mentioned research right at the outset. Research is a key part of where we get our inspiration and we continuously learn from our projects. So we're monitoring how this building is performing, not only in terms of environmental performance, but actually how does it make the users feel? How is it dealing with those social issues in terms of just creating nice workspace for people? And one or two exciting photographs that I've only just seen because they've only just come back from the photographer. So watch this space. I thought I'd better mention something in Manchester because our studio here is getting busier and busier. And this is under that notion of social value as well, really. I don't know if you've seen the posters around the city that General Projects, who are our client, have been promoting this building through identifying money that they believe will demonstrate social value. So they've done research looking at how this is going to create employment, how it's going to be an attractive addition to New Islington. This is on Pollard Street. And they've translated that into monetary value, and they're identifying £11 million worth of social value that this project is bringing to Manchester. And that's a snapshot from their website. If you search Electric Park Manchester, the General Projects website, these are all the facts that they're identifying to promote this new space. And they did quite a lot of research into what they wanted to build, and we helped them with that research. The ambition was to create new, modern warehouse space, really, and to think about colour. And again, our colour research, our social research are all things that meant that we were bringing that knowledge to this project for inspiration, not just staying at a blank sheet of paper saying, what are we going to do here? And then I mentioned collaboration a lot, but actually does collaboration have to just be with other human beings? Maybe we can collaborate with computers. And this is something that I've only just really discovered, and we've got a little team of people. We've got one of our research bursaries doing research into Mid-Journey. So I want to show you one or two things that Mid-Journey does. This creates images by just speaking to the computer. So here the prompt was multi-level gridded steel scaffold structure covered in translucent diaphanous cladding set with a wildflower meadow cinematic style. Just talking to the computer and these images are produced. So guys, you want to get scared because this is doing what architects do. These images have just been created in the matter of seconds by us talking, giving prompts to a computer. These images were created in just a few minutes. Here's another one. Arab Bedouin tent covered in white, silk-like spider's web set within wildflower meadow, butterflies, detailed ceramic, cinematic style. 30 seconds later, these images are produced. Is that not a bit scary? Is this not inspirational that you can just talk to a computer and these images just get generated in front of your eyes. I mean, there are other people looking at this. Jose Sanchez is an architect and theorist at the University of Michigan. He's producing these images just by talking, giving prompts to a computer. Quite incredible. The same guy doing this. Another guy, Andrew Cudless, University of Houston, using the same program, Midjourney, spending a few minutes talking to a computer, comes up with this. Here's architecture, 15 seconds, and the same guy does this, just with different prompts. So where's the house style here? There isn't a house style, he's just communicating with a computer. Now, I think this is inspirational, but how are we going to use it? I think that's a fundamental question. Because I do think we as architects have got real skills that aren't just about talking to a computer, about talking to people, about all those skills in that very first image, about doing research, about lateral thinking, about testing ideas, iteration of design. And you need to rely on a piece of paper to do that. So when I'm joking about throwing away blank sheets of paper, it's only a joke because it's our starting point. And we have to, I think, understand that there are plenty of people doing this, generating AI images in a matter of seconds. And if we're going to beat this, we need to revert back to what paper and lateral thinking and creativity and just communicating between fellow people and listening. Listening skills are really key skills that we as architects need to develop. And translating those ideas using paper, maybe using computers as well. And that's on time for some Q&A, because inspiration is a two-way process, and I'm hoping to get some inspiration from you guys now.
So one thing that stuck with me was how even through all of your projects, there was this mode of interaction with people, the sort of setting and sparking of conversations. And with the world constantly developing, architecture changing, technology growing, environmental factors changing, what do you think the role of interdisciplinary is in architecture, and how can that be translated into education from the start?
I think there's lots of questions there, aren't there, really? I mean, I think, building any project, whether it's a small domestic extension, whether it's some of the larger projects we're getting to work on now, it involves collaboration across disciplines. So that interdisciplinary attitude, that multidisciplinary attitude is essential. And, it's often said, isn't it, that an architect is a jack of all trades, and to a certain extent you have to be that. I think you have to be able to talk to different people and understand enough of what they are offering so that you can assemble that information and bring it together in a collaborative way. And for my practice, that's not relying on one person. I think the idea of an architect swirling a cape and delivering a design is sort of long gone, really. I think the architect is about collaboration, it's about listening, as I've said, and you're all learning those skills now. So I think that Beaux-Arts traditional way of learning architecture, to be given a brief and you go away to your garret and you draw it all up and present it back a few weeks later. There's a role for that, but it's a small role, I think, because I think a stronger part of an architectural education is to learn to work as a team, collaborative working, and to work across those disciplines. And so, I think my language comes from running a practice where that's our attitude of work. Everyone has a voice. Hawkins Brown is a 100% employee-owned trust. So everyone has a voice, everyone has a role, everyone contributes to our work. And that, to me, is important. What we're not, and I don't mean this as a criticism in any way, we're not BDP. I mean, BDP offer a service which is about working together sort of as a sort of interdisciplinary business, one shop fits all, if you like. We very deliberately don't employ engineers or landscape architects or some of those other disciplines, because we actually enjoy the diversity of different people we can work with. But again, we have to recognise that we bring different teams together for different projects, and it is about collaboration. It's always about collaboration for us.
If anybody has any question, feel free to raise your hand, ask it.
Or if you don't, we get drinks quicker.
Yes?
So do you have any nice stats you can tell us about how good it is to reuse a building rather than demolish it and build a new one, in terms of the environment, materials, etc.? Or is it not as good, or is it the same basically as demolishing it?
No, I think it's a good point you raise, and I haven't really mentioned some of our research into carbon and trying to reduce emissions. I think gone are the days of buildings just being demolished to create a flat site. I think more and more we're going to have to justify any demolition because of the embodied carbon in those buildings. Park Hill is a project I didn't show, but if you look at that building, we stripped it back to its concrete frame and then rebuilt it, and we did quite a lot of analysis of how much carbon and energy we saved by retention of the frame. And it was a lot. I haven't got the exact stats, but we developed something called HBERT, which is Hawkins Brown energy reduction tool, and it's a free-to-use Revit-based tool. And what we get in return is that we get the data from various materials, and it's not true to say that a brick wall has got a certain amount of energy existing, because it depends on when those bricks were made and where they've come from. So we're trying to analyse and get base data of where of what embodied carbon is in certain products and certain materials, and are carrying out quite a lot of research. I mean, I genuinely think that, and I've already said, that we will not be demolishing buildings like we have been doing for the past 100 years. It's madness to me in this country that if you build a new building, it's exempt from VAT, whereas if you refurbish a refurbished building, you've got to pay 20%. So buildings are being just demolished just to make a VAT saving, which is madness. It should be the other way around. Normally a value-added tax is added. It used to be called purchase tax. It used to be on the purchase of a pair of luxury shoes or whatever. And if you repaired those shoes, you didn't pay tax on the repair. It should be the same with buildings. You should actually pay a carbon tax based on what you're building, and then when you're working to repair that building, you shouldn't be paying tax. And I think there is, the Architects Journal have had that campaign, haven't they, for retro first, and I think more and more people are understanding the benefit of retention of buildings, and I'm seeing more and more of that. So staring at that blank sheet of paper, not knowing where you're going to put that first line, I think it's less and less. That you're going to be looking at survey drawings and working out how you can adapt buildings a lot more.
Do you have any advice for new architects,
Yeah. Just learn as much as you can. And learn to listen. I think a lot of architects, listening is a real skill, and I don't think we generally as a profession are taught to listen. There's different levels of listening, and I probably get these figures wrong, but sort of the base level of listening is actually not listening at all. Not hearing, that's level 1. Level 2 listening is sort of listening but not understanding. Level 3 listening is listening, but you're actually listening to respond. And I think most people get to level 3 listening, and you're constantly, when people are talking to you, trying to get back in to respond back. Level 4 listening is actually is a level which I encourage people in my studio to get to, where you're actually engaging with people and trying to work out what's in it for them and what they need and what the issues are, and you can have a proper dialogue. So learning to listen. Level 5 listening is like the holy grail of listening. It's like the Samaritans are trained at level 5 listening. But get to level 4 listening is one thing I would say. And don't be scared of a blank sheet of paper. Use a pencil. And don't look at Mid-Journey thinking it's the answer. And don't listen to the colour police. Questions at the back. Come on, there's some questions at the back.
Asha?
Yeah.
I was wondering, like, what's your process to like filter through all the research that you have like access to that you've done, and actually find like the key bits of information that then go on to spark inspiration, design something?
That is a great question, because we're asking that ourselves all the time, and it is difficult because if we, when we've got an office and several hundred people, they might be doing something in Manchester, which is brilliant, that we don't know about in London. So how do you share that? So a lot of my job, if you like, as a sort of founding partner, is to sort of go around the various studios and just try and make those connections, encourage people to bump and grind like some of those buildings I was showing you. So that you do need to have ways of reviewing what people are doing. I think the past few years through lockdown have been really quite interesting and obviously tragic for a lot of people. Hopefully people are moving out of that now. But what we learned to do in the studio was actually use Teams and Miro boards so that we could actually just quickly exchange information. And we have an office in LA which is half a dozen people, maybe 10 people. They're a time zone away, and it's very difficult to have a dialogue with them. They just keep calling us up saying send more money, and we keep saying that's not working like that. You should be sending money to us. The dollar's so strong. But what we have learned, and the reason for mentioning that, is just by having Teams means we can have a sort of twice a week catch up with them. We can have a sort of design reflection. We used to have in our studio design review, which is a bit like a crit, I think. And we felt that that was too hierarchical. People weren't actually bringing projects for review. A bit like everyone's scared of going to a crit. People were saying, I'm not ready for a review yet. And we're saying, well, hang on. It's not a presentation. We want to know what the brief is. We want to know what's going on. So we've stopped reviews and we have design exchange in our studio now, and people are encouraged to exchange ideas at every stage of a project. So whether that's when we're first debating an opportunity, do we want to go for something, whether it's design development, whether it's looking at material we might be preparing for design review panel or planning review, or actually whether it's the end of a project and we're trying to learn post-occupancy evaluation. So those design exchanges are a technique in our studio for encouraging that cross-fertilization and dialogue between different groups.
We have a question here.
In terms of convincing clients for more sustainable ways, do you have a particular strategy for trying to convince them?
Well, every client's different. I mean, I think some clients are very educated and they take a long-term view, and they already know that, and they're, part of the aspiration of the project is to be sustainable. So I would think a lot of our clients, let's say universities, with a, by definition, an educated client and an estates team who will be managing that building, they're always very interested right from the outset. And, depends on the sector. Housing clients, we're finding that people like housing associations or local authorities who are building housing, again, are mindful of issues like fuel poverty with their tenants, that they are, again, interested. We can persuade, and we have persuaded, Camden and Hackney in London to build passive house standards because they realise that extra investment, which on a two-bedroom apartment might be £15,000 to £20,000, is worth it in the long run because they're going to get payback over that life of that property. There's less M&E kit going into the building, so they can make savings there. So those clients are easy. It's the volume house builders in that sector who are more problematic. And it's very difficult. It is very difficult. Because they know, they're an educated client, but from a very commercial standpoint of view, they want to flog it and move on to the next site. So to answer your question, we don't work for people like that. We try not to work for volume house builders. And so, you do have different clients, different attitudes. I think part of it is actually trying to cut through the bullshit as well sometimes, and using research, using the tools of HBERT or other tools to demonstrate, well, it's going to cost you this extra, but it's going to be worth it. The payback, what is the payback period? And, you know, I think we just develop different techniques on different projects. Often it's, you know, relying on other consultants as well. You know, we can't always be, you know, we can't persuade clients on our own. You know, you're working as a team, and I think if the cost management and the engineers are all in tune, saying this is the right thing to do, clients are more likely to listen. I think it's difficult to be global, actually. You know, we're fortunate enough as architects at Hawkins Brown. We have done work abroad, and it always amazes me when we go to, when I've been to Korea. We've done a couple of projects in Seoul. We've done a building in Hong Kong for life sciences at the university. We've done work in the States. As architects in all those places I mentioned, we have a voice. You know, we're part of a team, but people we get listened to. And so I do think we have opportunities in those countries or different cultures to promote good architecture, because clients are interested in coming to us for that. I find it difficult in the UK often because people don't really understand what we do as architects often. And I think we have a collective responsibility as a profession, as students coming into the profession, as more experienced practitioners, to actually communicate clearly what we offer. And you know, that needs us to have a voice. You know, I think people like George Clark, you know, on the television, and Kevin and MacLeod are part of that movement, trying to give good design and architecture a voice. But it tends to get dumbed down to the sort of level of an individual house. You know, why we can't actually promote good quality design, you know, in the public realm. I think, I mean, a lot of my work's been in London, and I've been a mayoral design advocate for Boris when he was mayor, and for Sadiq also, they both, I think, had a vision about improving the quality of the public realm of housing. Sadiq has been talking about good growth by design. So, you know, we have to find examples of good practice, and we have to talk about that, I think, to a wider audience. And I encourage my architects in Hawkins Brown to engage with their communities. A lot of architects working with Hawkins Brown talk in schools, especially to sixth formers when they're thinking about what subjects they might be going to study. We get engaged with younger primary school programs. I just think we need, as a profession, to shout more loudly about the benefit of good design.
Sorry, could you give a history of how your partnership came about and how you grew to your practice?
How long have we got? A few minutes?
We have like two more questions.
Two questions, okay. Well, we set up the business in 1988, which is 30, whatever that is, 35 years ago now almost. And at the time, Russell Brown and myself just felt that we wanted to just try and do that on our own, and we didn't really have much ambition. We didn't really understand what we were doing, I guess, but we just learned along the way. One of the things we did straight away was to actually go and talk to other practitioners who'd set up and learn from what they'd done. And it seemed to us pretty obvious, if you start doing domestic house extensions, in 5-10 years time you'll still be doing domestic house extensions. So we never did small scale work. We just punched above our weight and took on large projects right from the beginning. We set out our stall in the marketplace, if you like, and that's the sort of work we wanted to do. And you know, we took advice about how to run a business. And one thing I would say is we've had a 5-year business plan every 3 years. We've always reviewed our business plan. So we've just evolved. We've grown steadily. We've had in the past few years a sort of strategy for sustainable growth. So we've always given everyone a voice. We've been through different sort of structures. You know, we wanted to share that business with everyone, and we became a partnership. We had 30 partners. And if anyone's been a partner, having 30 partners, you realise that's a bit of a nightmare. So we decided that we were going to restructure, and we reformed that business into a limited company. And that limited company is owned by a trust. And that trust is owned solely to look after the interests of the employees and make sure we're providing ethical service. And within the Articles of Association of that trust are the founders' wishes. So Russell Brown and myself wrote what those wishes were, and it was about having a social value and about not working in places where they have low scores on the Human Rights Index. You know, so we'll ask your speaker next week about working in Saudi Arabia. We won't work in Saudi Arabia, but you might find that other architects do. It's always very easy to be busy as an architect. You know, I've never had a day in the last 35 years when I haven't had work to do. It's really easy being busy as an architect. It's just more difficult finding paid work, because a lot of people you talk to want your ideas and they're not prepared to pay for it. And you have to ask why that is. You know, if they want to get legal advice, they don't go to a lawyer and expect the lawyer to give them legal advice for no money. So, you know, you have to, I think, work that out quite carefully. You know, we do work on spec, you know, but we don't just do anything. We think very carefully about the projects that we're interested in, that we think we can bring value to, that I've got lovely clients, and when we'll put the effort in. And I think architectural competition is something that we think very carefully about. You know, an open competition when there are 300 people submitting for it, you know, just do the maths. You know, what's your chance of winning? 0.3%, 0.33% potentially. You know, we don't enter open competitions. I quite like what the RIBA do with their two-stage competition, so you can submit information and hopefully pre-qualify. And then you might be one of 5 or 6. Well, those sort of odds are a bit more understandable because you can work out the maths. You've got a 12 or 15% chance of winning, 20% chance of winning. Well, then we'll put the effort in. So I've probably waffled, but to answer your question, I think it's about just valuing what you can offer and making sure that you're just not giving it away.